All right, YouTube. Donald Trump's campaign manager just announced Trump will be skipping the last debate before Iowa. I wish that I had an Admiral Akbar mask so I could scream, "It's a trap!" Because that's what he's doing right now. Um, some people, of course, will say, well, why is he skipping the debate? Is it because of Megyn Kelly? Is it because he's not feeling well? He's probably laying a trap for his enemies. He has a penchant for doing this. But beyond that, it's just what makes sense. Why else would somebody with a large ego who obviously likes coming up in front of crowds that largely support him, what other reason would he have for not being there to verbally hammer other people right before Iowa? What reason would he have? The first reason is that he's already conquered the other candidates. None of them anymore are really within striking distance in Iowa. I think what's going to happen is he's hoping that the other candidates will speak badly about him while he's not there, while he takes to Twitter and then calls them underhanded backstabbers. And to a lesser extent, he's hoping they won't attack him, and that will force them to attack one another. Now, who are they going to attack if Trump's not there? They're going to hammer Ted Cruz, and to a lesser extent, somebody like Marco Rubio. If Trump is absent and the other candidates end up spending any great deal of time talking about Trump, what will he say to his supporters? Oh, I wasn't even in the debate, and all they could do is talk about me. Just more proof about how powerful I am, how worried they are. That's a win for Trump. He doesn't even have to expend any effort. One tweet, and he's hammered the message home 2 or 3 tweets later, and somebody else is ready to drop out of the race. If they don't talk about him, they can't target him. They'll have to target one another. What will end up happening, again, they'll go after Cruz, which is the only person that's remotely close to Trump in Iowa. I think that's what he's hoping will happen. But right now, Trump is surging in Iowa. Ted Cruz fell a few points, as I predicted that he would after New York values. He fell 2 or 3 points, and then he stabilized, and he's back at his floor. Trump, meanwhile, shot up about 5 points, depending on which poll you listen to. Individual polls, when the aggregate updates, it's probably going to be a staggering number. It'll probably be around 40%. I don't think that Cruz is capable of mounting enough of an effort in the next week to really supplant that. And I still think, I don't think that this absence at the debate is going to hurt Trump any. Additionally, there are two other things to think about. What if Trump is primarily hoping that the debate will be a wash simply because he's not there? That is, a lot of the people that tune in. You look at the numbers for the Republican debates and for the Democratic debates. Very few people comparatively are watching the Democratic debates. Now you've got you've got Clinton, who is very well known. You've got Sanders, who is very popular among the youth. They're all streaming it. And yet the numbers are still a fraction of that of the GOP debates. Trump is hoping that his absence is going to starve the room for oxygen. Not a lot of people will tune in. And then even if one of the other candidates does manage to attack him and land a hit, not a lot of people are going to see it. People aren't going to have as much of a reaction if they're not physically watching it live, if they're just hearing about it the next day in the news, because Trump has already convinced about 40% of the Republicans that any right-wing outlet that's not explicitly pro-Trump is pro-establishment. They don't like that. And his support is hardened at this point. He's got a new floor around 35%, larger than I expected he'd get going into Iowa. Probably up around the critical number he needs to be at to win anyway. He's not worried about losing his supporters for skipping a debate. Rand Paul notably skipped the undercard debate and was chastised as being whiny about it, and yet after that, did he lose any support? No. Ultimately, because he casts himself as well as an outsider, he's against the establishment, he doesn't like the rhinos, as he calls them, he didn't lose support. His supporters' number is far lower than that of Trump. But it's hardened support. That 2 or 3% of the Republicans that like Rand Paul, they don't really care if he skips the debate. In fact, it was to his credit. If Trump casts this as, I skipped the debate because I knew it wouldn't be fair, his supporters are going to latch on to that message. They're not going to care. They want to see Trump speak, but they'd just as much like to see him tweet about the debate and take swipes at the other candidates. His absence means nobody can directly attack him without running the risk of being called backstabbing lunatic insider. He just came off a major win against National Review. Specifically, I'll say this. If Glenn Beck hadn't been one of the people signing on with the National Review to pen this anti-Trump stuff that they did, probably it would have been, nobody would have cared. Nobody would have paid any attention. The fact that Glenn Beck, who is arguably the most hated figure within so-called conservative politics, O'Reilly can't stand him, the establishment Republicans can't stand him, the libertarians can't stand him because he's a fake libertarian. Libertarian-leaning Republicans, that is. Sort of the nativists can't stand him because he seems to be a crybaby on the immigration issue. Nobody really likes Glenn Beck. This is a person who threatened to martyr himself a year and a half ago. This is a person who claimed to have tens of thousands of pastors, part of a black robe retard regimen. I made a video about this, who threatened to martyr themselves in order to protest Obama. He is an attention whore. People know that he's an attention whore. He's probably one of the few people within the right that is going to draw more fire than Trump is. Trump is not liked by the establishment either. He is also not liked by some of the Tea Partiers. He's not really a dear to the evangelocons. Glenn Beck kind of is in a way, but he's a Mormon, so he doesn't really have all the Protestants on board. But nobody likes Glenn Beck. The fact that his name was on it completely poisoned the whole manifesto that otherwise might have decreased Trump's support at least slightly. But none of the other names on it were even recognizable to anyone who's not a regular viewer of the National Review. That's an ever-shrinking number of people. It had no effect. In fact, it had the opposite effect. It made the Republicans look desperate to destroy Trump to the point where his support base just grew. Him skipping the debate is a tactical move. He's not doing this because he has a head cold. He's not doing this because he has the flu. He's not doing this because he's just bored with it and self-sabotaging. He's doing this for a tactical reason. Every single thing that he has been doing, every tweet he makes, every word he says, is measured specifically to win the nomination. He is in it to win it. Early on, people thought that he wasn't. Obviously, that was not the case. His decision to skip the final debate before Iowa is a tactical decision. He's either trying to starve the rest of the candidates of media attention by removing himself from the debate to make it so that nobody's really going to care what goes on at the debate. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people, probably millions of people, who won't watch the debate because Trump's not there. That's the only reason they watched it. If Trump was running as a Democrat, the Democratic debates right now would be a lot more steamy. There'd be a lot more people watching them, and people would be energized and talking about how great the next Democratic presidency will be. But he's running on the GOP side. Karl Rove and all the others, they hate him. They've even tried to do the old reverse psychology thing, talking about, oh, well, Trump's bad, but Cruz is even worse. They've been trying to get people to support Cruz because here's the magic secret. The establishment doesn't mind Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz is part of the establishment. You know, he doesn't have a long political record. He was born in Canada, all of these other things. He's a money candidate. He's backed by the same corporations and banks as Hillary and people like Jeb. He's not outside of that same establishment. His views are relatively in line, except on something like the NSA or the Fed. And he abandoned ship both times when Rand Paul was the one actually standing up to these groups. It was Ted that abandoned these things. Thankfully, I would say, Ted Cruz is unlikely to become the nominee, specifically because he's very unlikely to win one of the first three states. I believe there has never been, in modern history, a nominee from either party that didn't win at least one of the first three states. Right now, if the primaries and the Iowa caucus were held today, you would expect Trump to win all three of them. I don't see a way going forward where many of these other candidates are going to be continuing to get enough funding to actually keep their campaigns going. Those that are, Trump's self-funded, so he wouldn't care if he came in like fifth in all of these states. He could keep going. He wouldn't win, but he could keep going. Cruz is beholden to Goldman Sachs. Jeb is beholden to the Bush family interests, the Saudis and so forth, just like Clinton is, by the way. Now, Marco Rubio has his people. All of these different campaigns, they're getting funded by these corporations and banks that really, they want to pick a winner. And they usually will fund one candidate on both sides. That's why Clinton has so much funding. She's getting virtually all of the funding from these groups on the Democratic side, but those same businesses are still hedging their bets on half a dozen different Republicans. But no, this is a tactical move by Trump. He's not doing this, for no reason. He's obviously got his reasons for doing it. I would have to say ultimately it comes down to his absence is going to throw the debate into chaos, because what else are these people going to really talk about without him here at the debate? I can't think of what they're actually going to say, because they can't really attack him when he's absent. His fans will then go out and shitpost and shill on behalf of Trump. That's what you would call it if you didn't like Trump anyway. They will go out and spread the word. Establishment blackballs Trump while not even present at debate. And that's a win for Trump. It's not a win for anybody else. If they don't attack him, they're not going to have much to talk about. They're basically going to spend that hour, 2 hours, or whatever it is, hammering the person in the lead there in Iowa, which is Ted Cruz, in Trump's absence, or somebody like Rubio, who has a stronger showing in New Hampshire, I guess, or Kasich. Kasich could get knocked out by this. But clearly Trump's not too worried, specifically because he's willing to throw this sort of Hail Mary up in hopes of crushing down people even further, specifically because you've seen those candidates that have risen to higher levels, so that they're near or even above, as Carson was briefly, Trump in any state or nationally, they end up going back down, specifically because of their negative interactions with Donald Trump, because he's so measured in what he's doing, specifically to derail these campaigns one by one. He did it to Fiorina, he did it to Carson, now he's done it to Cruz. There is nobody else who hasn't already peaked yet. Marco Rubio peaked some time ago. It was lukewarm. Jeb Bush was the front runner before Trump got in. Jeb really, above all other candidates, is the one suffering, and he's also dragging down other candidates with him. He's still got a beef with Marco Rubio. He doesn't like Ted Cruz. These people themselves may not have a lot of supporters, but if they're just attacking one another, Trump makes off like a bandit. He's only got to run out the clock for another week, and he's probably got Iowa. If he gets Iowa, I predict he'll be the nominee. If he comes in second place, he'll still probably win New Hampshire and South Carolina. It'll just take longer for him to cement the nomination anyway. All of these media organizations saying, oh, well, Trump might be inevitable now. It's telling, because specifically when they talk about this, when they talk about the possibility that Trump is inevitable, there's a very negative tone to it. They say, oh, well, woe is us. Trump's going to be the Republican nominee. Well, since most of these same groups are presumably not Republican-leaning outlets, some of these foreign ones, they would be considered almost communistic in this country, so they're obviously not going to support the GOP. They're worried about Trump being the nominee because they're worried about the very real possibility that he'll become the next president. They wouldn't be worried. They wouldn't say anything about it at all if they thought he had no chance. They wouldn't say that. Again, though, Trump and Rand Paul have that similarity. Rand Paul did skip the debate the last time around, the undercard debate. He didn't lose any support. In fact, I believe he's a point or two above where he was. Yes, he's obviously not going to win, even though he has an abnormally high amount of support, specifically in Iowa. If he comes in third there, I would be very surprised. Not unpleasantly surprised. It would help him ride it out and at least inject some more issues into the campaign. Libertarian-leaning issues, I would hope, like the GOP should step away from the drug war because it's a fucking disaster, or the GOP needs to become more non-interventionist like it was in the early days, or something like that. But at the same time, if you expect Trump to lose support when most of his supporters, they don't care if he goes to the debate. They're not going to, if he's not there, they just won't watch the debate. Instead, they'll queue up his Twitter and they'll watch what he's tweeting about the debate potentially. And that's where they'll get their news of the debate from. They're not going to watch like clips of the actual debate because they don't care about any of the other candidates. His coalition, his floor, his long-term floor below which it's very unlikely he'll go without a major mistake, is up around 35%. Well, unless everybody else starts dropping out like flies, nobody can really become a threat to Trump. And nobody is going to drop out before at least the first 3 states are done. The problem is, if Trump wins all 3 of those states, he's likely to skyrocket, siphon off all of the support lost by those that do drop out, and that'll just make it impossible for anybody else to win. I've already predicted Ted Cruz has painted himself into the Santorum corner. That is, if he wins any states, they'll be flyover states. He's not going to get a lot of delegates. He has no possibility of becoming the nominee. And even if he did, the Democrats will sue him the first day. So what's the fucking point? Even if you like Ted Cruz, the Democrats obviously are going to do that. They will, and he will end up bogged down in court, unable to campaign for an extended period of time. And therefore, you end up with President Hillary Clinton. Now, I would say, of course, Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton are the same thing. Just like Jeb is the same, Marco Rubio, Martin O'Malley, a lot of these figures are exactly the same. They get funded by the same people. They're in bed with the same people. They have similar views, even if they don't publicly disclose the similarity in their views. There are very few outliers here. You can go with socialism. You can go with libertarian-leaning GOP. You can go with nativistic, non-intervention GOP under Trump. Those are basically the outsiders that you've got. The rest of them, they're all exactly the same. So unless a person wants to, or you can go third party. Those are your choices. Because the establishment within the Democratic Party and the establishment within the Republican Party, they're joined at the hip. They're the same thing, basically. If you take a coin and put a D on one side and an R on the other side, yeah, the 2 sides look different. They're still part of the same coin. This is what you have to tell people over and over. They don't quite get it. I should do a pictorial demonstration of this to show exactly how the Democrats and Republicans are so closely related. And I don't care if Trump wins. But I will say this, he's the one driving the attention, naturally. I'm obviously going to talk about him. And I don't expect that his absence at a debate is going to hurt him at all. In fact, it might end up being helpful towards him because it might be part of some larger scheme. He'll probably have his Twitter ready the second that it starts. That's about all. Peace out.